Hello, how are you doing? Many thanks for joining us right here on Debate 4-on-1. With only one day to Christmas, some of you already in holiday mode. For us, we have one agenda: to keep debating, at least until even when the president comes to the program. And of course, that is what we will be doing tonight. And we are looking at Moments 2015, key events that took place in 2015 or are already taking place in this year. And of course, in Rwanda and in the region. This is what we'll be talking about right here in the program. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. Let me introduce my panelists on the program today. We have Dr. Goloba Mutebi. Thank you for joining us once again on Debate 4-on-1.
My pleasure.
Shaka Kanuma makes a comeback on the program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, on this other side, we have Alex Ngarambe, who's a journalist. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And Gonzag Muganwa comes back again on the program. It's like a rematch. He said, I wasn't finished yet. I wasn't done yet. So we are going to be talking about key issues that have taken place both in Rwanda and, of course, in the region. And importantly, let's start with the latest event that actually has been taking place in Rwanda, and that was the referendum, which most of us keep talking about. And one of the key things that is an emerging issue, and actually not actually one, there are several things that are emerging from this referendum. Number one, the 98.3%. Some people, including Gonzag, saying that this was actually abnormal. It's not really normal to have, such a number. There must be something. There must be a problem out there. Goloba, for you, what is your quick take on this one?
It depends on which 98 you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Because there was the 98% voter turnout.
We're talking about those who voted for Yego.
Certainly, it's not usual for people to vote in that kind of way. But anyone who has followed elections or voting in Rwanda wouldn't find that unusual. When has there been elections in Rwanda when people haven't voted in the high 90s? I mean, this is a continuation. The variation is in whether it's 93 or 97 or 94 or 98. So for me, it doesn't surprise me. If it's surprising now, has it not been surprising before? So what's new?
So it's not even a new issue. Because it seems that President Kagame, if we're looking at, the kind of grading that we get in school, he's an A material president, always above 80. And this is not this is not unusual in Goloba's words, but of course unusual for Gonzag. For you, Shaka, what is your quick take on that?
Well, you have to ask yourself what kind of society are these things taking place in. Well, some people might live in countries where it's impossible to go and get such a voter turnout in the first place. Most voters will sit out the election in most of the societies where it's strange, quote unquote, for them to see voter turnouts that are going to 98%. Now, in Rwanda, we are at that stage in our development where everyone feels so much is at stake. Now, if you go back to the history of some of these people, I'm telling you, not even 50 years ago, a guy like Winston Churchill, I think, he was getting this kind of vote. To the extent, quote unquote, Winston Churchill was almost given dictatorial powers. That is at the stage the country which he led, Britain, was at after the World War, the devastation, and so on and so forth. Why did people so massively vote for him? I may be wrong about the history, but I remember reading somewhere that there was such a situation where Winston Churchill was about to get dictatorial powers, quote unquote. Now, in Rwanda, of course, this is still a society devastated in so many ways, and that has seen tangible results which they did not expect. Some people thought that this would be a basket case, and indeed it should have been. They've seen what they've seen. And if they are going out there and saying we are giving the person or the system which has brought this about almost all our votes, or almost all our yeses, it doesn't surprise me.
So it's not abnormal?
It's not abnormal.
Alex, you were missing in action last week, and of course, before we went on air, you were trying to bring back that debate we had about Itore Ryabanyamakuru, and of course, I'm not going to allow you to do that because you missed out, and that is your loss. Let's talk about this one that we're talking about right now. Abnormal or normal for you?
Well, I think the result, we have it the way it is. I don't know if it is by design or just came up by mistake, but I want to look at a few events leading to this referendum, because before that we had our parliament going across the country to do what they called consultations with Rwandese, and their figure was that only 10 people across the country against this whole thing of changing the constitution. And when it comes to the Electoral Commission, we have seen a few districts, or if not many districts, where we have even more than 10,000 people in one district getting opposed. So I want to ask myself this difference. It might make slightly if we talk about in regard to 100%, 98% is close to 100%, but that difference in the margin by the two institutions, I still don't understand how this big margin could have come up, because either one of the institutions was not accurate. So we have the result, cannot overturn it, but we have to look at the efficiency of some of these institutions.
Some of the institutions. But let's just get this fact clear and of course more accurate. When they said 10, did they mean 10 parliamentarians or 10 Rwandans?
10 Rwandans, according to the best of my understanding.
Is this a clear fact? You followed this process. I mean, the 10 Rwandans are the ones who had opposed the change of constitution, or was 10 MPs?
That's funny, because when the results of the referendum came out, began trickling out, some districts, for example, Chichichiro, 5% of them said no. Now, can you tell me that it's 10 Rwandans making up 5% of an entire electorate in a district? I don't think so. I don't know. It sounded ridiculous, actually. I heard of something like that, 10 Rwandans, but maybe it was a very unprofessional, kind of count or poll.
I think that one came out of the report the parliamentarians produced. That means the 10 who came out openly to tell them. So, which is different from when people are voting in the ballot to both, because there are many. Maybe there are other thousands who never attended the consultative meetings by MPs. But because you started talking about how I said that the 98% is abnormal, I did not mean that it surprised me. I expected it going that way. I was talking about the whole political process that produces consistently a result in the 90s. My argument is it does not reflect any competition, does not reflect the existence of alternative ideas, or the fact that there are different groups that can present or organize and present an argument against the dominant view.
And is this a bad thing? Is it a bad thing?
Yes, because not that the result in itself is disputable, but it's bad to the extent, because I personally believe there is a tendency that is silent, that if given an opportunity, if allowed an open space, would at least produce maybe 10-15% voting on the other side.
He's talking of space. Golobo, you've been on the ground doing your research, talking to various Rwandans and, of course, people who are friends of Rwanda in different ways, and those who also are critical of Rwanda in different ways. What he says that it is not normal. It doesn't reflect a system where there is open opposition to whatever is going on in the country, and so he's faulting the whole system, the whole process. Is this a clear or an accurate, statement?
Well, I think that one has to start by understanding the political system in Rwanda post-genocide. There is an opposition party in this country, or there is a party that styles itself as an opposition party, and this is the Democratic Green Party. anybody who cares to listen to radio in this country, or who watches television, or who reads newspapers, and I presume that all Rwandans at least draw their information from at least one of these three media, knows what the view of the Green Party is. Mm-hmm. In that case, one would say, look, there are people in this country who have heard what the Green Party has said. It has been opposed to this, to the amendment of the Constitution. And so those people were free to vote in support of the Green Party. Now, the other thing that we need to understand is that the post-genocide political settlement in Rwanda does not provide for adversarial contestation. There are 11 political parties in this country. Of the 11 political parties, 10 have lined up in favor of amending the Constitution. Now, have they been forced to support the amendment, or have they done that voluntarily? Now, the Green Party said, look, we don't want to be part of this. We are opposing the amendment of the Constitution. So if 10 political parties agree, the question we should be asking is, why are they agreeing? Are they agreeing because they don't think? Are they agreeing because some of them are under duress? Or are they agreeing because there is a consensus around what they want Rwanda to be like, as we speak of now, or where they want Rwanda to go? I think that, of course, when you talk to people who view democracy as being simply about parties contesting each other, as some kind of ritual, this is what we see in other countries. It's not here. And some people can say it's abnormal. I think for me that I wouldn't call it abnormal. I would call it unique, in that you have several political parties that have come together and agreed that they want to take this country in a particular direction. Mm. And on very many key issues, they have always agreed. Now, there is one party that disagrees. Unfortunately, it's a very small party. It has very limited reach. It has limited resources. What should we do about it?
Mm-hmm. And bring us to the big question, whose fault is it? Is it the fault of the government? Is it the fault of the system? Whose fault is it?
There is, of course, the idea that the politics of consensus is pursued. I totally support. It's a brilliant idea. But is it a real fact? I personally think the other parties are dominated. They are dominated. They are more. If you look at the history, what happened around beginning around 1999 up to around 2003, there was a deliberate effort, a systematic effort to make sure that those parties that had existed, MDR, PSD, PR, and so on, that was systematically weakened, so that they could. At the moment, I don't even think they exist as serious political parties. They are largely like satellites of the ruling party. I saw Dr. Gorowa wrote a very interesting article when PSD held their Congress to support the Constitutional Amendment. We know from what we witnessed there that even within that party, the way we presented it was as if the whole PSD was in agreement that they wanted the Constitutional Amendment. But we know there was a serious dispute within the political party, which ended up with several of the MPs resigning, even if they never said that is the issue.
So are you trying to say that Goloba's article was inaccurate?
Maybe he did not have, or he ignored particular
He's
science.
here. Let's not say maybe. He's here.
I don't know what informed his view, but
I did
I
did not see Gonzaga at that Congress. Mm-hmm. I was there. Mm-hmm. I was witness to the debate.
Every politics does not take place.
I'm not naive enough to think that there is unanimity in the PSD.
Okay.
Nor would I even begin to assume or even claim that there is unanimity in the RPF about anything. Mm-hmm. There was no unanimity. And in any democratic decision, there is always a major tendency. Within the PSD, the vast majority of members of PSD supported the proposition. There are those who opposed it. I was there. I was sitting. I heard them. I saw them opposing it. When it came to voting, the voting was open. People lined up. Everybody cast their vote. When the votes were counted, the group that wanted to support the Constitutional Amendment won the argument. Now, you're telling me I wrote an article that suggested everybody agreed. No, I'm sorry, I didn't. Did you actually read the article?
Yes, I actually read the article.
You read what you wanted to read, but not what I wrote in the article.
But as you said, the tendency that would be presented is as if all these, even those political parties, the different ones, when there is an argument over an issue, how is it handled? Okay, there is a vote, yes, but is it really the actual vote that shows this is the outcome?
What would be the actual vote in your own definition?
No, because my question goes to the extent of debate that happens internally within these political parties. Yes, is it sufficient to say that if they come to an outcome, if they reach a stage of voting, I agree, after they have voted and there's one side has won, yes, it is proper that the whole political party supports what or the political membership supports. But is there sufficient, open and independent, and even without any fear or coercion that people would actually debate and agree on this position? My following of the politics for over the last 10 years in the country, of listening, of talking private to many politicians, there is that people tend to sit back and say, this is winning, let me
He brings us now to the next point, actually, of the sufficient time for this referendum, because that has also been another emerging issue. Yes, you will jump on it as you bring in the other point.
I really respect Gonzaga's views.
Yes.
And really, he is informed in a certain way about what politics should be. But my question when it comes to political parties and different actors and so on, is like, why should it be that there actually have to be many political parties anyway for something to be defined as a democracy? It's almost like political parties are an end in themselves.
So what you're saying is multipartism is not the end to democracy?
Honestly, some of the countries that have gone on to achieve wonderful economic development and socio-economic denominators and so on have been single-party countries. And I can even go ahead and mention the Communist Party in China, which has done wonders to bring that country to where it is right now, becoming a superpower and almost becoming the biggest economy in the world. Some estimate like in the next 20 years. Now, they did not need political parties to get where they are right now. They looked at their situation, they assessed the billions of Chinese and their needs, people starving, people were desperately poor and so on. When there was just no use for political parties that will only come in with a lot of opportunism. And by definition, a political party in a country, in one of the poorest societies in the world, by definition, that political party, whether in opposition or something aspiring to be in opposition, most of the time they will be just exploiting the situation to get in power. Well, there is a justification sometimes for many political parties to happen. But let us not forget, in whose interest is it anyway for a country to have many political parties? Is it in the interest of the people who live in that country, or is it in the interest of the people who feel that they rule the world?
But also, I think, Eugene,
Yes.
just a minute. I think what Gonzaga is trying to... the point he's raising is an important one, and we actually do need to debate it. But it strikes me as if he assumes that there is any context in the world where any political decision, or any decision within a political party has to be agreed unanimously. I wonder if you understood what happened in Tanzania. How did Magufuli how did Lowassa get prevented from being candidate for CCM? Come to Uganda and see how parties there operate. In all political parties, the major tendency always takes the day. And in all political parties, there are views that are going to be silenced because those views run counter to the interests of the organization. It's not unique in Rwanda.
So it's a normal scenario.
That's the way normal politics works.
We'll get back to it because our debate is not necessarily just about the political parties, but of course it's also important to go to the next emerging issue on this referendum that we just had in the country, and that has been the timing, because even the president was mocking those who were trying to say that we didn't have sufficient time to have debate on this issue. When did they want this referendum then to have been done? Alex, for you, was this a concern for you? The dates for the referendum being announced and the time for the results being, the referendum itself coming out and the results itself?
I think in the minds, the Rwandans, in their minds, have been prepared for this because this had been going on for almost a year or two. So the timing of the referendum, to me, it doesn't matter a lot because this was almost determined even way before this. So the timing to me
was okay.
It may not have been okay, but I mean, we had to go into a new year knowing that, and this is my opinion, by the time we will get into 2016, Rwandans should know that President Kagame is coming back. That was the message. They wanted to prepare the Rwandans to know that 2016, they should start the year knowing President Kagame is coming
And
back.
this is what the Rwandans wanted. They were not rushed, in your opinion.
Well, it's not about rushing or not rushing. It had to happen.
It had to happen.
And Rwandese had to get the message clear that the man is coming back. That's my opinion.
Gonzaga, rushed,
I mean,
not rushed, very okay.
Either-
Where do you stand in that particular debate?
Of course, we have been debating this issue for the last 2 years. I've been appearing on radio talking about it. But still, even if it had been given 2 months or 3 or 1 week, the result would not have changed. But at least would have the legitimacy, the conversation within, or what it would, the whole process. Because look, they amended 38 articles of the Constitution, and the document was not published in sufficient time for people to read it. I would assume, if you think the population has a role to play, at least publish a document. Because I saw even some lawyers were saying that some of the articles are not properly written and so on. At least if a document is published for a month and people talk about it, the outcome would be the same. But the weight of legitimacy, according to me, would be different.
Legitimacy. He speaks of the legitimacy.
Legitimacy to
What
whom?
does that ring in your
No,
mind? What does it make you feel?
I know what legitimacy means, but the question for me is legitimacy to whom? Because, as Gonzaga himself says, as Ngarambe said, this has been an issue in this country for the last 2 years. I mean, I don't live in Rwanda all the time. I go and come back. But this has been a preoccupation of Rwandans. I started discussing this with Shaka 2 years ago. And I've been discussing this with Rwandans of different kinds over the last 2 years. I've had it discussed on radio. I've seen it written about in newspapers. I've seen it debated on TV. Now, if we agree that 3.7 million Rwandans signed petitions to make specific presentations to parliamentarians to do something, it suggests to me that they understood
What they wanted.
what is going on. If members of parliament were sent out to consult communities, it suggests to me that they informed the communities what was at stake. But the interesting point that Gonzaga makes is about publishing a document. Have you actually read the Rwandan constitution, all of it?
Gonzaga, have you?
Before it was before this
it was
amendment,
amended?
yes, I
You've
have.
read it cover to cover?
Yes, I
and you
have.
have internalized it?
I wouldn't say I've internalized the whole of it because
How many Rwandans do you think would have read that document if it had
at
been
least
published?
if I read and I came up upon an article that is controversial, I would go on radio and say it. However much I said, maybe you get the royalty
Yeah,
interpreter, then there would
but
be
you see,
a national
the,
conversation.
the arguments you're making are logical, but by what we know. Look, I'm Ugandan. I've never read the Ugandan constitution. There are very few people who are going to spend their time reading the constitution. Of the 3.7 million Rwandans who wrote petitions, I would bet you maybe 2% would bother to read that document. Now, the question of legitimacy. Legitimacy to whom? More than 70% of the voting population made presentations to Parliament for the Constitution to be changed. Now, if you're talking about legitimacy to international media or legitimacy to the donor community or legitimacy to people outside there, I can understand what you mean. If you're talking about legitimacy to Rwandans, I would disagree. And so the debate then becomes legitimacy to whom and why is it important?
We can have another debate whether the 3.7 million were actually as genuine as they are supposed to be.
Well, I
but
don't
you
know.
see, there are other issues in the document. For instance, an issue of the extent to which the Rwandan state should be secular or not. If it had been put out there for the public to debate, I think it would have excited more debate even than the term limits. But don't you think there should be a national conversation over that?
Let's bring in
It was
Shaka.
only debated in
Well,
Parliament for a few minutes.
Yes, Shaka, for you-
me, the measure of the legitimacy and taking into account all the arguments, you know, Rwandans are not sheep who will just keep quiet and go quietly in the booth and vote what they are told and go back peacefully and no one is making a noise in the street. There are people who have self-interest. There are people who are sending who are sending money into a bank. There are people who are building a house. There are people who are doing many things. Now, to tell me that people would be voting and they would come out and go peacefully and never... Because the first test of a legitimate exercise, whether it's legitimate or not, is when people are voicing their views openly, and some of them may be violent in the streets like Congo or Burundi, and said, like when Nkurunziza when Nkurunziza announced that he was staying on despite the fact that his term was up, his 2 terms were up, whatever he said, Burundians said, we are fed up with you, we don't want you, just to go.
So what's the correlation
now,
in this issue of timing?
Here, I'm saying that Rwandans have enough of a stake in their society, and they have seen enough of a difference in their lives to say this is what we want.
And so whether it was 1 day or 2 days, they would have decided whatever they wanted.
1 minute, they will have gone still out there and voted yes in the numbers they did.
All right.
Something small about legitimacy.
And by the way, I'm one of them.
Yes.
I will be... Well, we're not supposed to say what we voted. I voted yes because I have seen what difference in my life.
Prove it. Prove it that you voted yes.
Well, I wish I could go in the booth and pull out the piece of paper on which, but I
Shaka, we need to take a short break. Maybe we can go back and check.
But
when we are.
I will tell you one thing.
Yes.
The things you see in your life, that when you travel outside in other countries and you come back, you say, you know what? Maybe there's something really good going on here. I might not be out there, carrying placards in the street and, rallying around political parties and so on, but that's not what would be useful in my life. Mm-hmm. What would be useful in my life is, am I getting a good service?
What you're experiencing during the time. Let's take a short break.
Very small.
Just hold it in there. Let it keep boiling a bit, and then when we come back, we release it. All right? Keep the pressure there. Yes. Of course, you can as well take part in this particular conversation that we're having right here. We're talking about the defining moments in 2015 for Rwanda and in the region. When we return, we're looking also at the long wait that seems to be taking place. Of course, for those who are waiting for the big announcement on whether President Kagame is going to say yes to your request or no to it, it's something that also we're going to be debating right here in the program. Also, we'll be crossing border and talking about what would Magufuli do when we return. Stay with us. Okay.
So Natasha, are we cornering our teachers?
Exactly.
Are we being unfair to them?
At the end of the day, Fiona also mentions that the more you show them this condom, the more you're opening up their minds to having sex. But do you feel well represented? Do you think the media issues are well taken to the table when it comes to advocacy? How do we convince them and say that we shut it down because you exceeded the limits? The word conservation looks just complicated, but how do we simplify this?
What role do our schools play then? And the people around our children, what role can they play in order to avoid these children becoming a menace in the society?
Yes. Caroline, you just want to sound moral, but you're just not accepting the reality on the ground.
Well, I want to sound moral and encourage it and practice it.
This is an EA production.
The Nakumatt Shop and Win Christmas Bonanza is back, and this time it's even better. This festive season, shop for any amount at Nakumatt UTC or Kigali City Tower and win instantly. There are plenty of Nakumatt gift vouchers and other prizes to be won. Shop now, tomorrow, and every day until you win. Merry Christmas from Nakumatt. Nakumatt, you need it. We've got it.
And welcome back. Thank you so much for choosing to be with us right here on Debate 411. If you want to participate in the program and, of course, react to various statements that are being made right here in the program by my panelists, you can do that on Twitter at Debate 411, or you can tweet me directly at Eugene Anangwe. You can as well use the hashtag Debate 411. All I'll do is just click on it and search and read some of your comments. So do send them right away. Of course, we are definitely talking about the defining moments, the key events that have taken place in Rwanda and, of course, in the region. We've been talking about the referendum. We've talked about the 98.3%. We've talked about the timing. And, of course, it's time to look at the big announcement that most people kept waiting. In fact, during the Mushichirano, people waited and said, it's going to come in right here. During the press conference at the end of Mushichirano, most journalists probably had already even written headlines, ready for the answer. But it didn't clearly come out. Goloba, for you, what do you read with the president saying that, for now, we are easy. I'm comfortable where I'm seated. And I don't want to divert, the attention of people from what we are doing right now. What do you think about this?
Well, it's not an issue that I have personally spent a lot of time thinking about. Mm-hmm. I think that 98% yes vote is unlikely to be taken lightly by the president, because at the last RPF meeting, he did state quite clearly that if it came up with something like 55%, he wouldn't even consider it. But 98% is a huge vote. I personally think that it's unlikely he's going to say no. Mm-hmm. But he did say yesterday that there's still 2 years. He still has 2 years of his current term. So he's not in a rush to state what he's going to do. And, well, who am I to disagree with him? Mm-hmm. I think that he has the prerogative to announce this when he chooses.
Whenever time he wants to do that.
Yeah.
Shaka, some people say that the writing is actually on the wall. And, of course, with Goloba saying that 98%, it's a number that is hard to ignore or just say no to. I mean, is this the same feeling for you? Do you feel like he may just say yes because of these numbers?
You know what? Like they say, a week in politics is a long time. So I will not predict anything. I will not commit myself on anything that is in the mind of another person. So I think I will leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. Shaka decides to sit on the fence on this one. What about you, Alex?
Well, I think he has already said yes. And people who are waiting for the word yes from his mouth, they might not get it until they see his face on the ballot. Mm-hmm. So all this, the process.
What makes you think that he has said yes? Come on, let's not take this lightly.
Yes.
Because many people depend on this answer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the referendum process and how it came about, that's when you're talking about the legitimacy. I think the legitimacy was not around the referendum, but the referendum itself was trying to give President Kagame legitimacy to come back. And like Dr. Mutebi says, 98% actually. It's big enough. Mm-hmm. But I still believe, even if he had gotten 55, like Goloba says,
yes,
I still think he would come back. So, like you said, the writings have been on the wall. And it's just a matter of time that we are going to see his face on the ballot paper.
So for you, it's a yes?
Exactly.
Gonzaga?
Revolutionaries don't retire, as certain man used to say. I mean, I said it last time, the whole state machinery, the whole RPF machinery wouldn't go to work without him having decided. Mm-hmm. This is the political process that supports a decision that is already made. So, as he says, the referendum, the parliamentary vote, the signatures, it's part of building the legitimacy, helping explain that we are continuing. As he said, there are no time limits to progress, and I largely agree that his leadership has largely been very progressive, and there is still, people are not tired of him. That's why you don't see demonstrations. That's why people don't take risks. But saying that you wait a particular moment for him to say yes, that would only be part of a political process. But I don't think all these state resources, the time people are put in, would have would have been spent without him having made up his mind.
But the choice to say that, let's keep waiting and not just going outright and just say...
That is political service, just being smart.
Where Dr. Goloba
appearances.
comes from, Museveni never said yes immediately. It took a long time. People were saying we are going to cross the bridge when we reach it. But when we reach the bridge, we saw what happened. So I think it is buying time here in Rwanda, like Museveni was buying time, and maybe known to some alarming statements, because that could have a serious impact on the politics of the country.
No, but I think, Eugene, the way we are discussing this issue surprises me. The president said it very clearly at the RPF meeting that should it be 55% or something like that, he would not. He would not. And he was very categorical about that. Now, you can second guess him and say, even if it was 50%, he would stand. I personally don't know. I prefer to believe what he said. Now, the other thing is he refusing to declare openly because he's playing around with Rwandans? Or is he, when he said if it's 55%, I will not even consider it. For me, it means that now that it's 98%, he's quite happy to consider it. He said he wanted to hear what Rwandans, both those that had petitioned Parliament and those that didn't, what they were going to say. And he, at least according to him, they were going to say that in the referendum. Now, the other thing, as far as I'm concerned, is that now that Rwandans have said what they want to say, I don't think that we should even be wasting time. For those who know the president in this country, we should even be wasting time thinking he wants to impress somebody out there, or he's looking for the legitimacy from somewhere from outside Rwanda. I personally don't think so. I think that he must have reasons why he's not declaring openly. But anybody who would read the situation as it is, given his past pronouncements, it's very likely that he's going to stay. Because, as he said, he listens to Rwandans. And how could he not listen to 98% of the eligible voters in this country if he said he listens to Rwandans?
Some people are arguing that there could still be surprises based on some of the statements he's been making and saying we need to start thinking of a country where all of us, play the role of building it, and not a country that depends on an individual, whether me here or not there. And he keeps saying that I can still do or fight the good fight whether I'm in or I'm out. So others reading and feeling like, we might be surprised here. Shaka, do you feel that there could be a surprise?
My feeling is that the tendency is that the president is going to listen to these 98% people who say yes. And the yes, by the way, is not merely a yes to change the Constitution. An article in the Constitution is like a yes, we want you to go on. And, this goes back to the homework that was given to Rwandans, and they prefer to call it a homework in 2013. And it has been a very deliberate process to sound out the people. And it's something that originated from the party itself. And I think that where we have arrived at, and the voices that have spoken out, and so many Rwandans who would be seriously frustrated if the head of state at this point decided to take the contrary view. I think the tendency is that it will be a yes. Having said that, I would like to contradict my friend Gonza here.
Yes.
Some revolutions do actually retire. I'll talk of Nelson Mandela. He retired after one term. I'll talk of Kenneth Kaunda. He was a revolutionary after a certain number of decades in power.
He was retired.
No. He retired. So I'll take the contradictory view there. Of course, there are some who think that they are made of mahogany or some kind. I'm not talking of the former vice president of Uganda who used to call himself mahogany, even though clearly he was not. But Some tend to think that they are immortal. They are and they end up doing more damage after 4 decades in power and so on. But there's a few wise revolutionaries who decide, I've done my part and I'm leaving the floor. And in fact, some of them even don't take power. They don't go on to enjoy the fruits of power, even if clearly they were in a position to do. I will talk of the most prominent of them, Che Guevara, who never went and enjoyed the fruits of the fight he had fought for in Cuba. He decided to go on to find other revolutions. So I think that that is actually very harmful. Harmful and
I was just quoting one of the revolutions.
Without going there, without going into that one deeply, Shaka,
yes.
It's important also to debate the two sides of the coin.
Exactly.
Yes, we've talked about the numbers and what they may imply in the mind of the president when he's probably thinking of this, making this particular decision. But it's important also to look at the other flip side of it. Supposing he says, we still have 2 years before the elections and probably he just decides and says no, but gives them a reason and gives them a way forward and says, I said I can still be with you whether in office or even out of office. And so I'm saying that I will support you and whoever else that the party or, I feel can be able to take up this mantle. What are the possible scenarios of happening if it was a no, if it comes to a no?
Personally, I really think that one of the much neglected issues in this whole debate is that this country is run by a very powerful political organization, the RPF, and that President Kagame is just one member of that organization, even as he's the chairman of it. And as far as I know, prominent members of that organization have told me that as far as they are concerned, this is an issue of responsibility. They are not calling upon him to stay because he's the only person who can run the country, but they are calling upon him to stay because they think that he's still playing an important role, that they cannot simply farm out to somebody else to test a new person. They say this is not the time for testing a new person. This person who is around has done very well. He's doing very interesting and important things. They would like him to carry on as they think through what happens next. Now, and again, one of the things that are not very well publicized about the entire post-genocide political settlement is that President Kagame refused to be president in the very beginning. And it took a great deal of hard work on the part of the RPF to try and convince him to become president, and he still turned them down. And they chose somebody else. Now, again, it was after a long, protracted process that he eventually agreed to lead the country as president. I think that there is a tendency to ignore internal processes within the RPF. People tend to think, he's the one who decides everything and whatever he wants is what happens and so on and so forth. I am reliably informed that there have been and there are still ongoing discussions within the RPF about several aspects of this entire process. And so for me personally, I think that given the way senior members of the RPF frame it, they have put a request to him, and somebody said to me actually, he said, look, President Kagame is a responsible person. If we make the judgment that it is a good thing for him to stay on as we think about what happens after he leaves, I don't think he'll be so arrogant as to disregard our views. Now, that was said to me by a senior member of the RPF. Now, for me, it suggests that they did not just wake up one day and say, he should stay or he should go. I think there has been a process of reflection on where the country is and what the best way to carry on the way it is. So for me, I really don't see him turning them down. And if he does, I think it will be something quite significant that will make him turn them down and for them to accept it.
Alex?
A surprise? No, I don't expect a surprise no from him because like we all know, he's a man who has the interests of Rwandans at his heart. And taxpayers' money is one of those interests. And this referendum to determine if he comes back or not, a lot has been put in it in terms of taxpayers' money. So I don't think really that kind of money would be
put to waste
just to gauge his popularity. And at the end of the day, he surprises people by saying no. So to me, the no does not arise.
It does not come to your mind.
Not at all.
At all. As we move away from this particular point of view, the inside person that told you this, did they also tell you of a possibility, just in case he says no, what they have already planned as a party?
No, they didn't. But also I think that one thing that I didn't mention, I have spoken to President Kagame himself several times about this. And I personally genuinely believe that he has done a great deal of agonizing over this whole thing.
Within the party?
No, personally, as a person. I don't think that this is something that he's jumping at. It is an opportunity for him to stay around because he loves being there. I think that when he was saying earlier on that he intended to step down, I don't think that he was joking. Personally, I think that there has been some change in the context within the country itself, but also within the party, that made him reflect on this, because there have been conversations going on. But also, let's not forget, for me, the point at which I thought things were changing in a direction that would lead inevitably to this discussion was this war, the M23 war, and how donors reacted to that war, and how they cut aid and the pressure they put Rwanda under. That's when I began to hear conversations about this country cannot be safe without him, because you see how these people have behaved. Supposing we did not have him here, what would have happened? For me, it's at that point that I detected that something was shifting. And I think that the way it has been to put him as an issue of responsibility, the same way it was put to him in the beginning, I find it difficult to imagine that he would very lightly just sort of, or flippantly turn them down and say, you know, guys, I don't want to stay, I'm going. I think it would take a huge internal process.
We have about 5 minutes to go, because it's even important to understand or underscore the fact of transitional politics, and of course understanding a post-President Paul Kagame in Rwanda, which he also mentioned at the press conference yesterday. Should this period that we are in now, and of course after the promulgation of the constitution, should Rwandans expect to start seeing someone who would be slightly more closer to the president, being fronted to do certain things, you know, in a way of being groomed? I mean, is this what we should expect to see?
I don't even know how to answer that question, because groomed, even if that...
Because everybody says, why hasn't he groomed a person to take over? This is what outside people say.
You know, and what process would that grooming take place? Because if, for example, you're talking of political processes, you know, the one individual cannot, out of the blue, even if he's the chairman of the party, begin grooming someone. I think it will be an internal party process, maybe the way Tanzania does it with their Chama Pinduzi, or it will be someone who will be rising through the ranks steadily, and then there is a consensus around him. And even if the chairman of the party himself were grooming someone, he would not tip his hand publicly. So I think that is not something we are likely to see.
Not at all.
No.
Gonzaga, in Kenya, President Moi openly came out and said, Huyu kijana, Uhuru Kenyatta, and started the process.
And you saw it backfired.
And at some point it backfired. Do you feel we've learned lessons from this?
I don't think we have reached that stage yet. If you had what Dr. Goro was talking about, internally within the RPF, they have thought about it for so long. My interest is in how long? How long? Does it take another 15 years? It shouldn't. At least should have maybe the next 7 years, that first mandate of 7 years. That should really define. That is sufficient time for the country to have reached a level where that those external threats, where we need his strength to confront, but also being able to move fast enough so that if there are internal dynamics happening within the party or within the country, you are ready. Because you wouldn't expect that everything would remain smooth forever. There are people with ambitions everywhere. So somebody may sit in the sidelines for 10, 20 years and say, no, I cannot wait for any longer. So there should be a stage where people start moving to the next level. And those who want to compete are allowed to compete.
But also, Eugene, I think that this whole thing of grooming successors, for me, there are two things I think about it. First of all, we as Africans, or even you as Rwandans, you should decide what you want. Should President Kagame choose a leader for you, or do you want to choose one for yourselves? Because I suspect that if he openly groomed a person, you would hear Rwandans complaining about, oh, why is he doing that for us? We should be able to choose the person we want. Now that he shows no sign of grooming, again, it is a problem. Now, what do you guys want? These international friends of Rwanda, donors, and who have you, does anybody groom leaders for them? Because they're the ones, they also go on about, oh, you know, is he grooming a successor? Is he grooming? And then on the one hand, they are talking about democracy. Supposing he groomed somebody and anointed that person, would you describe that as a democratic process? Because on the one hand, you say, oh, what we want to see in Rwanda is an open democratic process. And then on the other hand, you say, you know, he should be grooming a successor. What do people actually want? I personally don't think that we should get into this business of leaders being groomed. Magufuli wasn't groomed by anybody. He emerged from nowhere. And I'm not aware, I mean, Tanzania is the one country we use as an example in this region of regular, peaceful change of leadership. I'm not aware that anybody who has come up as president of Tanzania post-Nyerere was groomed by anybody. In fact, what Tanzanians will tell you...
They were self-made, all of them.
Every time the incumbent has tried to groom somebody, that person never passed.
Backfires.
Yeah, they pull them down.
Yes. So, because of time, we've just raised the issue of President Magufuli. Our Foreign Affairs Minister had a meeting with him. And of course, there's been a lot of talk, the Magufuli effect, the bulldozer, making headlines here and there. Of course, Twitter going crazy. What would Magufuli do? I mean, when President Uhuru Kenyatta was elected, of course, there was also a lot of news around him. You know, he's opened up State House, he's opened up the presidency, and there was a lot of talk which suddenly also just went quiet. And of course, today, if you go to Kenya, most of people are complaining, saying corruption, you know, leadership and all this kind of thing. Is this thing that is going on in Tanzania right now just something that is also about to just fade out?
There are many things I think about this whole Magufuli effect. First of all, as somebody who has studied Rwanda for a long time, Magufuli is not doing anything that President Kagame hasn't done in this country. For me, what strikes me and what I keep asking myself, why are people suddenly praising Magufuli for doing things that Kagame has been doing in this country for a long time, for which he has never been recognized by outsiders? Because they keep harping on human rights and this and this and the other thing. But also, much more importantly, I think that Magufuli is doing things for which we should laud him. The question is he doing them within the framework of CCM as a party? Does he have the support of this political organization? And if he doesn't, how sustainable is this going to be?
Yes.
And the other thing is, you can't fight corruption or carry out far-reaching changes in a political system in which there are so many contestations. You get deflected. One of the advantages I think that President Kagame has enjoyed in Rwanda and that have enabled him to do the things he has done or to preside over the changes that he has presided over is precisely the point we were discussing earlier, that there is a consensus-based political system in this country where 10 political parties tend to pull in the same direction. So if, say, a minister from PSD committed an offense or did something that is regarded as not a good thing in this country, and they were punished, you're very unlikely to hear PSD saying, why are they punishing our person? Because there is a consensus here about,
on that particular action,
about so many different things, what is right and what is wrong. In a political system where you don't have a consensus around these things, it's very, very difficult. And I fear that President Magufuli may not make a lot of headway
with this going on.
Yeah.
And I was just going to ask you guys to give a comment on that. But then I thought, because news is coming up next, and I asked myself, what would Magufuli do? End the show, because the news is coming in next and we need to go. Thank you so much. Of course, we will keep this conversation going on even on and off air. And of course, thank you very much for your insights. Totally appreciated. And for you who's been watching us all through, thank you so much for being a part of Debate 411 from the time we started the program and of course to where we are today and the big expectation of hosting President Paul Kagame on this particular show. We just want to say a big thank you for supporting the program. We'll see you again next time, same place, same time. Be safe, have a happy Christmas and a happy New Year as well. My name is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.
This is an EA production.